What's poppin'? Welcome back to the beach.
We're back for Maxify Seminar, and today we're going to be taking a look at
Live,
Edge
Die,
of
Repeat.
Tommorow. Edge of Tommorow, Live, Die, Repeat, whatever you want to call it, came out in 2014 and stars Tom Cruise in an action sci-fi movie where he basically ends up repeating the day over and over again in a kind of Groundhog Day situation where he has to try to figure out how to overcome this alien invasion that is threatening the world. This movie seriously underperformed at the box office, very notably, but it made up for it in large part with DVD sales, which is not something that happens very much anymore, but I digress.
I kind of liked this movie because I always liked the sort of Groundhog Day type of repeating thing, and I'm a big time travel fan, so I like the concept of this movie.
Mm-hmm. And it's done very well, I think. For the majority of this movie, the concept is executed incredibly well, especially in the editing of this movie. He repeats the day enough times to where he's trying to figure out this plan of how he's gonna navigate through this day and get out of this terrible situation he's in so he can actually make a difference. And as he's figuring that out, it keeps resetting and resetting, and it gradually cuts out different parts, so you realize he's doing the day over again.
You know when it's resetting without having to see the beginning of it resetting every single time.
Yeah, which is great, and it shows just enough.
Yeah, it's probably kind of hard to do that, but it's done really well here.
But like I said, it does kind of lose its grip on this concept near the end of the movie, and the ending, I think, is probably the weakest part of this, because eventually the resetting of the loop thing that defines the movie conceptually kind of is phased out of the movie.
Yeah, so near the ending, this movie sort of turns into just a normal Tom Cruise alien, like War of Worlds or that type of thing movie.
Yeah, it becomes basically a very standard Tom Cruise action movie. And I think you feel that too with his confrontations with the aliens. Like in the beginning, it feels very methodical, like he has to memorize these exact movements and stuff, but in the end he's just walking through and firing, and then he drops grenades pins out of his hand.
I definitely really like the beginning of this movie, but I kind of have trouble with the ending, and it sort of ruins it for me because the ending's also a little bit confusing.
Yeah, it's very confusing, especially I don't know, it's hard to talk about it because spoilers obviously, but it's also hard to talk about it because I don't really understand exactly how it works at the very end. But beside the ending, this is a really good action movie. It's a very good action movie in that it's constantly engaging because there is this reset button that it gets hit a lot of times, and so you see these same sequences and you see him get more proficient with how he goes through these very elaborate sequences.
Another thing this movie does very well that I don't really give much thought in this movie, probably because it's done so well, is the VFX, especially on the aliens. I don't see much problem with the CGI on this movie. I think that's because they used it very wisely, but I think it's interesting how they did the mech suits.
Yeah, because a lot of that is also practical, and there's a lot those were heavy suits. There's a lot of good stunt work in this movie by both Cruise and Blunt, Emily Blunt is also in this movie as a supporting character. Yeah, it had this perfect blend of practical effects and stunt work mixed with CGI that made it look just very good.
Seems pretty real.
It felt like a real battleground.
Definitely.
Especially
very chaotic
during the first half. Emily Blunt's character is set up in this movie to be this it's kind of like a prequel setup in a very workaround way, and it's there's been talk of a sequel prequel thing that's gonna blow everyone's mind and be this whole brand new thing that's a sequel and a prequel. There's been talk of that for a long time, and it's just in development constantly. And I think that would be very intriguing.
That would be interesting.
Because Emily Blunt's character in this movie is very interesting. And I think the dynamic between Cruise and Blunt in this movie and their characters is a really cool dynamic because they're both just like fighting for this cause, kind of like just fighting to try to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah. I like this. I like it because it also seems like it's basically just them against everyone else. That I don't know if that's a good thing, but it's...
Also, it doesn't feel like a war movie, which is nice. Like,
yeah.
It doesn't feel like, I think, what was that Chris Pratt movie that came out that was like...
Tommorow War?
Yeah, Tommorow War feels like he's like a military guy navigating this alien thing. And that's where Tom Cruise is placed in this movie, is he's like in the military, but he breaks out of that. Like the military is kind of an enemy in this too.
Yeah, because they're kind of... The military in this movie kind of seems like they're trying to cover it up, and that's what I was saying with, like, him and Emily Blunt kind of being alone in this.
But it also has some good comedy, which I think this concept lends itself to comedy really well. Thinking about Groundhog Day, obviously, but also Palm Springs was used this very good. Well, yeah, Naked on Netflix. But yeah, there are good comedic moments in this movie. Overall, I think if the movie kept up the cycle thing in the ending somehow, instead of dropping it and kind of becoming this very formulaic Tom Cruise sci-fi action movie, I think it could have been a lot better. And I also think the pacing drops significantly when that happens.
Yeah, because, like, he's repeating, like, at certain points, like, every 5 minutes. And then at the end, it's like, it takes 20 minutes each time he resets. So it becomes, like, a weird...
Yeah, so you get into this flow of, like, this is this intense thing that's like, oh my god, when is he gonna, die, and this is gonna happen, and we're gonna have to do this again. And then it's like, oh, that's not gonna happen. And
it's just kind of phased into this Tom Cruise thing.
Yeah. So overall, I think I'm going to give Edge of Tomorrow a 1.5 out of 2.
I think I'm gonna give Edge of Tomorrow a 1 out of 2. That seems fair. I think it definitely had a lot of potential, and the sequel prequel thing is definitely gonna have potential too if that ever happens.
Mm-hmm. And that said, this is one of my favorite action movies, just because it's so conceptually genius. Which action movies, that's kind of rare to have an action movie that's so grounded in this like sci-fi concept, and that's why I think time travel movies are so fun.
Yeah. So overall, that leads to a total of 2.5 stars out of 4. I thought it was pretty good for a Tom Cruise movie. I'm not a big fan of Tom Cruise. This was good though.
Yeah, I agree. And looking forward, like we said, to the sequel. If Tom Cruise lives through doing the next Mission Impossible movies, then we'll definitely be here to review that. But for now, this has been Maxify Seminar.
I've been Blake.
This has been The Beach. And I've been Max.
We'll see you in the next one.